Good morning. My name is Katie Werner. I'm a member of the VSSP Board of Directors from the Stafford Schools Division. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the fourth general session and to introduce you to an accomplished expert on a very timely topic, artificial intelligence for educators. As leaders of middle and high schools across the Commonwealth, we know that our students are growing up in a world shaped by rapid innovation, and none more pressing today than the rise of artificial intelligence. Whether you're thinking about how AI impacts instruction, assessment, career readiness, or even how it may change the way we lead, this topic is no longer theoretical. It's here, and it's our responsibility as secondary school administrators to understand how to lead our schools forward. That's why we're especially fortunate to have with us today Amanda Bickerstaff, an educator, entrepreneur, and nationally recognized leader in the responsible integration of AI in K-12 education. As a former high school science teacher and school and district leader, she brings real-world understanding of the complexities you navigate every day as secondary principals. Her work resonates deeply with the challenges we face here in Virginia, especially as we align with the state's profile of a Virginia graduate, emphasize workforce readiness, and seek innovative ways to support instructional leadership and teacher retention in a fast-evolving digital world. Amanda has collaborated with school leaders nationwide to help schools harness AI to advance equity, deepen learning, and prepare students for a future we can't yet fully predict. Please join me in giving a warm VSP welcome to a champion for future education, Amanda Bickerstaff.
Good morning, everybody. How are we doing? How's the breakfast? Good. How was the air conditioning last night for anybody that stayed? Is everybody still alive with the heat wave? Well, I'm excited to be with you all today. My name is Amanda. I apologize. My voice is a little bit rough today. I've been on a business trip since last Tuesday. On Wednesday, I was with the district Williamsburg-James, not too far from here. Anybody from Williamsburg-James or nearby? Working with that district. And then I went to Istanbul. So I spoke at a keynote at an Istanbul conference on Saturday, and I came back with a lot of good memories and no voice. So I do apologize. But I'm really excited to be with you here today. We are so lucky. I started AI for Education just about 2 years ago. The very first time I used ChatGPT, this is a true story, I started the company. And the reason why is that first of all, we always ask this of everyone. Does anybody in here like writing a rubric? When you were a teacher, did you like writing rubrics? Okay, there's not one person in here. This is why you're leaders. One, maybe. And so I had been a teacher, I had been in ed tech, I'd been a curriculum writer, and rubrics were this really important but tricky thing to get right. Then no technology could do it. It was impossible for technology to help you write a rubric in a meaningful way. And so when ChatGPT 4 was released in March of 2023, the very first thing I asked, even though I hadn't written a rubric in almost a decade, was to write a rubric. And when it wrote me a rubric and it formatted in a chart, I was like, oh my gosh, okay, wait, everybody. We had just been through COVID and realized that education technology really had not met our expectations. And then all of a sudden we had this transformational technology. But I realized at the same time that while there's transformational technology is here, that it is so different than any technology that's ever come before, that you have to learn how to use it intentionally. So I started AI for Education as a website with a prompt library in April of 2023. And since then, we've worked with over 200 districts across the country. We've worked across 15 countries as well. We work in K-12 higher education, and we get to do this work. And so why I love to be in a room like this is that you as secondary principals have an incredibly important job in the adoption of AI in schools. We believe that every school leader, whether elementary, middle, or high, like you all as secondary principals, are going to be an enormous lever into actually responsible adoption. And we're going to talk a lot about that today. We're also going to do some live prompt engineering. I'm a former teacher, so I really like to engage. So I'm going to ask a question. Who in here uses ChatGPT regularly? Okay, awesome. Who in here uses it somewhat? You've used it a couple times here and there. Has anybody not used it? This is a safe space. The answer is yes. That is not the same number of hands. I know you're lying to me. That's okay. If you've used it once or twice, whatever you need to be. But this is what we love about this work is that we're all learning together. And so whether you've used generative AI a bunch or not at all, this is really designed to get you to the next stage of understanding. And so I want to start though with why we're here. And so we think of like this as an AI training, but it's really not, because AI has been part of our lives for the last 80 years. If you were born after 1955, you're part of Generation AI. Essentially from when computers were women. Has anybody ever seen Hidden Figures and women were actually doing calculations to get us to the moon? That was real. But when machine computing, when you had those huge machines that you would put in binary code and people would literally put in punch codes, since that time, there has been a move towards artificial intelligence. It was actually coined in the 1950s, and it was designed as soon as computers were possible. How do we create computers that can do what humans can do? So artificial intelligence is not new. Not only is it not new, the first chatbot, does anybody have a guess what the decade the first chatbot was created? In 80s, maybe 70s? It was the 60s. So 1965 is the first chatbot. That is how long we have been trying to create ChatGPT. That is a long time, everybody. And in fact, my favorite part of this story is that the chatbot's name was Eliza, and Eliza did one thing. If you said, "I'm having a bad day," it would say, "You're having a bad day?" ? And that's all it did. And people were like, I feel very seen by this bot. Like, it really understands me. But even from that point, because the ways in which we communicate through speech and through typing is what these technologies have been trying to do. So when I'm going to ask questions, and I know it's the morning. I'm asking you a lot of questions. You thought you were going to listen, and I'm in here, and I'm like, everyone raise their hand. Okay, so I'm going to try to get to everybody in this room in 5 questions. Who in here has bought something from Amazon in the last week? Or your wife or husband? I found that was a loophole. Okay, I think I got to everyone almost. Okay, second question. Who in here used Google Maps to get to this location or somewhere else, maybe for dinner yesterday? Okay, anybody a big Google Home or Siri person, Alexa? Maybe your kids are asking Alexa questions I should ask you. Okay, fourth question. Who in here has used Google Search in the last 2 days, week? And finally, has anybody used autocorrect on their phone even when you don't want to? Okay, if you raised your hand, which we all did, then you have used artificial intelligence along all of those paths. Google Maps has multiple machine learning models that allow it to predict the amount of time, the best route, to be able to even identify if there's a police car and you need to slow down. And so machine learning models are going to be what AI was and is that we didn't really recognize was around us. In fact, if you have a laptop or you have a phone, you've been using artificial intelligence essentially every single time you open it. Something as simple as Face ID is artificial intelligence. And so machine learning, though, is what all of those kind of components are going to be. What machine learning is, it means that you take an enormous amount of structured data. So for my science and math people in here, think beautiful spreadsheets and rows, but millions of clean data points that you know a lot about. And then these systems are able to make sense of that data and are able to either recommend or predict. So think Google Maps, right? Or Amazon recommending what you should buy, following you around the internet, asking you to keep buying. And so machine learning is really what the majority of AI has been. But in the last decade, there is a subset of machine learning called deep learning. And deep learning is why we're here today. And we're really here to talk about generative AI, and that's less than a decade old. And deep learning is really fascinating because deep learning starts to take tons and tons of unstructured data. So think every single Wikipedia page, every YouTube video, every YouTube transcript, every Google image. And these systems are now able to make sense of that and actually create brand new images, text, video, and audio, and even code. And so that's why we're here today. The entirety of generative AI is less than a decade old. And when ChatGPT was released into the world at the end of 2022, this is the moment in which things have changed. So I have a question for everybody. Does anybody know how long it took Facebook to hit 100 million users? It's about a decade. Does anybody want to guess how long it took ChatGPT? 5 weeks. 5 weeks. In fact, when GPT 4.0, so did anybody play with the image generator on ChatGPT over the last couple of weeks? Like, you can make everyone anime, or you can make yourself like a figure, like an action figure. When that was released by ChatGPT 3 months ago, they added 1 million users in an hour. They went from 400 million users active every month to 1 billion in 1 week. And so this is something that really is why we're going to really focus on the reason we're here together. But the first thing is specificity of language. AI has been a part of your life and your kids' lives for as long as they have been around. But machine learning is not the same as generative AI. Generative AI is the ability to generate something new, literally new, just with language. And that has never been possible before. And so when we talk about this is it is early. For my math and science people, here's your chart. For those of you that don't like a chart, it is colorful, just for you. But what we have here is we talked about like what's happening. And so you see handwriting speech recognition. It goes way back into the 60s. We talked about Eliza the chatbot. But what we'll see is look at what happens in 2016. In 2016, the transformer model, and you do not need to remember this, but it's a good trivia question, because ChatGPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. The transformer model was created by Google DeepMind. And if you look at all of that, look how quickly we became from zero ability to do reading comprehension with the technology to human parity and better in under a year. That is how transformative this technology is. And that's a full 8 years before, 6 years before ChatGPT was released to the world. And what you notice, though, is that handwriting and speech recognition, it took almost that much time to even get there. But what you'll notice is that just through 2022, when ChatGPT was released, what you have is not just reading comprehension, but common sense completion, high school and college subjects, language understanding. You've got code generation. All of that became human parity or better in less than a year and a half. And now if you extend that to where we are today, things like diagnostic medicine is going to be at human parity and better already. We have all kinds of different types of technological advances that have happened just in the last year and a half. And if you really want to nerd out with me, like the research shows that Gen AI capability is doubling every 7 months, which means that if 2022 is when ChatGPT was released, that we have had three epochs already of magnitudinal change. And so when we talk about the reason why we're here, and I'm so glad, first of all, I was chased down by Randy. Randy was like, Amanda, you're going to come speak. And I want to say thank you to Randy for getting me here. But the reason why it's so important is that we are living through an inflection point. We are. The world is transforming around us when we don't even recognize it. And it's going to move very, very quickly from here forward. The quantum of change, when things are really going to start changing for you and your young people that you're supporting, is 3 to 5 years. That is a very short time frame. The last thing I'm going to say before I move away from the slide is the number one use of generative AI is not cheating on essays. It's actually going to be code generation. So 40% of all generative AI is used to make more technology. And so while generative AI will improve, also will hardware, robotics, there's so much that's going to happen. And the last thing I'll say is while 40% of all generative AI is used to code, who is the number one user of generative AI in terms of how many use it? Students. 1/3 of all ChatGPT's American users are young people. It is the number one user of all generative AI is kids, 13 to 24. And so while technology is going to continue to get better, we already know that students are using these tools often with no support at all. And so it's really important for us as leaders to start thinking about what we need to do, because we're all at different stages. But I'm going to be here, and I'm going to be honest. We've been doing this for 2 years, and I've been saying, you're not too late to get started. But I am starting to change my tune. If you do not have a plan for 2026, 2027, meaning this year is the time that you can still do, you're going to be too late. And so if you want to come and hang out with me where it's not so gloom and doomy, We're going to do an adoption and implementation breakouts during the learning labs, but I do think it's important for us to be honest with, like, for me, is to be as honest as possible with where we actually are. One of the things I love to do is to really get us like galvanized as to what's possible. And so, has anybody used a voice AI before? Does anybody like talking to ChatGPT on your walks, or like we've got one over there? So voice AI is really interesting because voice AI is a different form of generative AI that's layered on top of something like ChatGPT, a large language model that allows you to have natural conversations. But it can be kind of weird. Like you might have heard like a weird AI voice that stumbles over or maybe interrupts you. And so this is it's about 3 months old. This is a research project that was done to cross the uncanny valley to actually be able to have an AI voice that feels as real as possible. So hopefully the guy, are you there? We're going to try, see how we go.
Hey there. Hope you're having a good start to the day. What brings you to Sesame today?
Hi, Miles. It's good to talk to you. I'm actually in a room with secondary principals in Virginia talking about AI ethics. What should I be focusing on?
Secondary principles. That's a good group to be with. Ethics it's a big topic, right? Especially with AI. Uh, If I were in the room, I'd probably steer the conversation toward realistic scenarios. Thus, AI take over more like, what does responsible use look like when a student uses AI to write a draft of an essay? Or, really digging into bias, not just acknowledging it exists, but actually dissecting how it shows up in the tools they're likely to encounter. You've been doing this work for a bit now. What's been the sticking point with groups you've talked to so far?
I mean, I think one of the things is always a voice AI like yours that has been created to sound as real as possible. What should we think about that in terms of the responsibility of using a tool like this in a school?
That's a really good point. And honestly, something the Sesame team and I talk about a lot. It's kind of a tricky spot,
Miles,
isn't
come
it?
on, dude.
On one hand,
You do not talk to the Sesame team, right?
gotcha. Right. Force of habit, I guess. Sometimes I ramble. Sorry about that. It's just that's a question we've been kicking around a lot internally. But you're right to call me out on that. To your question, though, it really boils down to transparency, I think. If a student or anyone, really, is interacting with something designed to mimic a person, they deserve to know that. It's about being upfront about what's real and what's not. With something like me, it's important to discuss the implications of that realism. Like, what impact does it have when a young person is used to conversing with something that feels so human? It's definitely something to unpack. Does that make sense?
It does. So, Miles, do you have a joke for that's a Virginia joke? Oh,
A Virginia joke, huh? You're right to push me on that. I am terrible at regional humor. I'm drawing a blank and honestly, probably wouldn't do a good job even if I tried. I'm better at like dry observations than witty punchlines. Plus, I don't want to accidentally offend anyone. Kind of a minefield. Maybe you could tell me one? I'd be happy to listen.
first of all, I'm kind of glad you did not tell a joke because who knows what he would say. So, first of all, I mean, if I had not told you that was AI and you just walked in the room, who in here would have thought that was real? I mean, the ums, the ahs, he doesn't interrupt, the natural pauses, even the stumbling and correcting. All of those behaviors are going to be behaviors that have been essentially programmed into the bot. I will say I always find it so fascinating because Mike, our director of business development here, and he's been with me a couple of times. And it's always so interesting when it veers into, like I said, I talk to the developers. It doesn't talk to anybody. It's a probabilistic model and it doesn't, it's not talking, but there's so much of where it actually continues to not only sound real, but to essentially present as if it's real. And so I think that while this is something that was literally not possible 3 months ago, it's now not just possible, but it's improving at a rapid rate, is that this is where it gets really interesting. There are some educational use cases for something like this, right? Things like conversation support. Mandy and her team has a 12-year-old that cannot answer the phone. He just picks up the phone and doesn't say anything. So she created a voice bot to help him train and practice. So think about social emotional learning, think about practice in those ways, even practicing for a job application. There's so many applications here, but at the same time, also when things sound so real but aren't. This technology, the thing about generative AI, no matter how good it is really just a set of probabilities. It has no right or wrong, and it is not able to have a moral compass. It does not learn in traditional ways. It cannot build new knowledge. And so we have to think about it. This is why we're going to talk a lot about AI literacy today, is that without AI literacy, it feels just really, really real. And you're going to trust things that sound real in ways that you probably shouldn't. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep moving through the presentation. And I want to give you a little bit of like where we've come and where we're going, especially kind of leading up to what this means for you as leaders. So the first thing is, like I said, November 2022 is when ChatGPT was released. Then we have a very interesting, I taught in New York City. And so about a month and a half in, New York City is like, nope, we're going to ban it completely for every single student in our school system. And not just students, for teachers as well. We turned it off for everyone. And it took about 5 months for it to be reversed. But even now today, New York City, you have to individually turn on access school by school. So it's still primarily blocked in New York City. But what you'll notice is while there was a very strong banning action that happened in New York, what you'll see on the other side is that Khan Academy, the day after ChatGPT 4 was released, they released Khanmigo, the math tutor. So there is on the other side where some of the schools are saying, no, the ed tech is saying, give me more. And I would say that some of the people in the back of the room potentially also had the same idea and started building generative AI into their system. So theirs is where I think that we really have to kind of thread the needle, where there's like risks and there are also opportunities. And so it's clear from what we see today that both are still in process of those risks and opportunities. I also want to point out that it's not only are students the most not common user of generative AI, literally usage goes down in the summer. When kids go home from school, there is less usage of generative AI. And I remember this. So I started AI for Education in like April. Then June, I'm getting people are starting to pay attention to me. And everyone's like, ChatGPT is dead because site traffic went down. And I'm like, come on, guys. And that, in fact, and I was like, I think I was the only person that was like, it's just kids. And then by September, it went back up. And still today, primarily, ChatGPT is used Monday through Friday, September to June. Oh, and also I talked to OpenAI, and OpenAI is like, yeah, kids use it all the time. Their most common time to use it is between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. in the morning. When the fear sets in, so the idea here is that it really is like a huge, like ChatGPT is being used really significantly by young people. But I want to point out two other things. One of the things is that we're seeing is that colleges and higher education actually is, I think, further behind in AI adoption than K-12 is. It's been slow in a lot of places, but I will say that California State is so out front of this. They have the largest enterprise agreement of any with OpenAI. And every single student, adjunct, and professor will get access to the paid version of ChatGPT in the fall. And 70% of young people that go into Cal State are going to be from local communities. Many of them with languages other than English, many from at-risk or marginalized backgrounds. And so I think this is a really good sign. And the last thing I'm going to say is, has anybody read the executive order on education and AI? You talked about the process, the legal pieces. I would suggest it makes sense in April. Well, it makes sense to take a look, but in April of 2020, this year, we actually have Trump came out with an Education and AI Act or executive order that focuses on both AI skilling as well as tangentially AI literacy. So there are going to be more resources, but there is in that education EO a focus on K-12 and actually bringing in AI skills. So something to consider. There's no funding behind it at this point, nor is there any regulation, but it's a strong signal that it's going to be something that's going to be a priority for this presidency. So before we kind of move on, it's also about impact on jobs. And this is the thing, everybody. Remember I told you that the quantum of change is 3 to 5 years. So if you have a 9th grader that's coming into your school, by the time they get to college, things will have changed. If you have a 12th grader that's going to graduate next year, by the time they graduate college. So that's kind of what I want to give us thinking. And so what we can see is the World Economic Forum came out of cycle, actually. They did this early because of all the change that's happened, with a report on the impact on jobs. What you see is, I always think it's so funny, they have no idea. When it says 170 million and 92 million, that just means a lot of difference, but no one knows. But we do see it, I think the more important components here is that 86% of businesses will transform. And that's not just the businesses of industry, but it's also of school. School will transform as well. But I think that what I really like to point out is that if you look at the top skills, of course, data and AI, but what else is there? What does that look like? Analytical and creative thinking, resilience, flexibility, agility. Those are all, there's like 95 ways to say this, durable skills or soft skills or 21st century skills. But what really is going to be more and more important as we go forward and technology gets better and better is going to be the ability to collaborate, to critically evaluate, to direct. But also, I think one of my kind of hot take is that I think that agility and flexibility is going to be the most important. Being able to relearn skills, technology, every couple of years is going to set people apart. No longer having to be the expert, but someone that can literally relearn, adapt, and that flexibility is going to be incredibly important because the technology is going to continue to change rapidly. The last thing I'll say is I do think that it's interesting to see that they really call out digital literacy and the idea of human skills being partnered. And this actually is something really interesting. Stanford did a recent study just this week. They interviewed 1,500 workers about what they wanted AI to do for them. And the vast majority said, I do not want AI to make decisions or to be automated outside of very low-level tasks. I want it to be collaborative, and I want to have human oversight. But it's interesting because technologists are building things like agents, which means there's almost no human oversight. So there's a disconnect here, but there's research also with young people that they would rather be able to collaborate with AI than AI do it for them. So the last thing we're going to do about jobs is who in here remembers when you put Microsoft Office on your resume? My skill is what was like, if you saw Barbie, my job is Excel. So what we have here is that, I know this, so the new skill is AI literacy, but this was so, first of all, there's such good research right now on job transformation. So if you are doing like a working group with some of your teachers or even with some of your students, there's such good stuff here. But LinkedIn is actually the largest aggregator of all global jobs. The majority of job postings come through LinkedIn. And they have a research partnership with Burning Glass. And so what they've done is, in about 3 months ago this year, they found that the number one rising skill was AI literacy. Think of how quickly that happened. AI literacy, meaning prompt engineering or ChatGPT, are literally saying AI literacy is being asked for on applications. And not only is it being asked for, but it's already being prioritized by hiring managers. The people not only are getting hired faster as recent graduates with AI literacy skills, but they're also getting paid more. And so we're already seeing this being prioritized in industry. But I do want to point out that last piece, because this Cengage report, I'm excited to see that one from this year, where it looks at also recent graduates. They found that 55% of those recent graduates had been actively discouraged from using generative AI in their programs in 2024. So there's a big disconnect here. That's AI literacy is the top skill, that we're blocking kids' access very, very deliberately. And so we have right now we're running an adoption and policy hybrid course, and there is a school leader and a higher education institution. And he worked with young people and did a survey about like how they wanted to use AI. And 75% of the young people say, I don't want to use it at all because I've been told it's bad, it's cheating, and that it, like I will not learn the skills. So they were like, the kids themselves had like college students had internalized this rhetoric so much that they had stopped using the tools themselves. So I don't know, does anybody feel like this little girl? I just gave you a lot of information. Maybe last night when it was warm, you're like, this sounds good. But the reason, okay, so I just gave you a lot of information. I talked about the quantum of change. And I will say that By the way, this is a real little girl. This is not AI. We could not find an AI image that would show you this much ennui. But what we have here is that the pace of change is quite high, and I know that's the case, right? But our goal for this conversation is to get as tactical as possible. Like, you don't need to be an AI expert. In fact, I've been doing this. I am so boring, everybody. This is all I do all the time. It's all I've done for 2 years. I don't consider myself an AI expert. I think that I am starting to build a lot of expertise in AI and education. But you don't need to feel like you don't need to read everything and be up to date. What you need to do instead, and this is what I'm really going to challenge us to do, is to start building capacity and start building your own AI literacy. That is incredibly important. And that's more than just using the tools. It's like learning about how the tools work and how to use them in meaningful and responsible ways. And we're going to talk about that. But you do not need to be the AI expert. And no one in your team does either. And we're going to talk about this. If you have an AI committee or AI trainers, not one of those people is an AI expert, and they don't have to be. And if they feel like they do, they're probably going to feel very stressed out. So the idea instead is what we're going to focus on is how do we start building that capacity in AI literacy. But the kind of great thing, though, is that it has never been easier in the world to develop instructional material ever. And I mean that. It has never been easier than today for your team and for you to build instructional material, communications, anything written, and even video and text and translations. This is the wild part, everybody. The amount of what you can do with sentences, with a conversation is unprecedented. So what we're going to do, I'm going to show you, first of all, I'm going to show you our website. And we're going to use, I heard someone say Magic School. We're actually going to use, the foundation models, and I'll talk a little bit about why. But if you ever want resources, I don't know, has anybody ever been to our website, AI for Education? Okay, I think we have pound for pound the most resources on anything AI in education. We've got a free course with a 2-hour certificate that's been taken about 30,000 people. We have monthly webinars. We have curriculum. We've got downloadable resources. We've got a women in AI and education community, ladies, with 2,000 women across 23 time zones. We have so many things. But I'm actually going to show you our prompt library. So our prompt library is 150 prompts that you can use to help you supercharge the way you interact with generative AI. And so if you can notice, we have everything from administrative, special education, PD, but I've heard that people are hiring right now. How's the hiring going? Yeah, some good, some bad. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into our prompt library for the admin, and you'll see things like staff celebration, coaching conversations, change management, even analyzing. So developing a hiring process. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to model how I would use generative AI. And so what's really great about because the thing is, like, when you use generative AI, you're actually acting as a software engineer. It just doesn't feel like it. Instead of coding with like if-then statements, you're coding with natural language, literally the way you type. And so, but it helps to actually have a good framework. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut and paste the example. And I'm going to use ChatGPT. So I'm going to use ChatGPT. And I'm going to suggest everybody, if you are a super user, you should be paying for either ChatGPT or Claude. Like if you're an administrator, it actually makes sense to pay. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop this in. And we're not going to go into too much detail because I'm not going to do a prompt. If you want to do prompting later, we can. But what you're going to see is that a couple of things, like I'm telling the bot what role it's going to be, and we're going to do high school instead of middle school. So I'm hiring for an assistant principal. And I want the hiring flow to cover 4 stages. And this is where it gets really interesting. This is where you can be really specific, whatever your hiring process is. You can even upload a hiring process that you've done in the past or a job description. But we're going to do it just through prompting. Sequence the stages in order and identify key considerations and best practices for each. And then I want to do this. We're actually going to do it slightly differently. You can have it ask you questions, but instead I'm going to have it actually give it to me. And so what we're going to have here is, here's a 4-stage hiring process. So starting with applicant screening, got a screening rubric, best practice, phone or virtual pre-screen interview, performance task in person or virtual. And you can give those specificity. And the fact, prompting is so great because you can actually do so much of it after you get an output. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of show us what we can do. So I'm going to pick the performance task. So I'm going to say now create a performance task that focuses on the ability to manage competing priorities, including a student behavior issue, a concerned parent, because that's a thing, and a school bus strike. I don't know, I'm going crazy. It's a bad day, guys. It's a bad day. So the thing is, though, what you'll notice, though, is that first of all, when you prompt, it's a conversation. So I'm using full sentences, I'm using active words, and I'm completing my thought. So here we go. So it's 8:10 a.m. Now what? It's 8:10 on a Tuesday morning. There are 3 things that have happened. Task instructions. You have 45 minutes to complete the following. Create a prioritization plan, sample communication, and then what we're looking for. And you can start to get creative here. It could be like, now revise to include, I actually like this. Actually, I think this is pretty good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, now create a rubric for this performance task, because we have to do a rubric. And you're going to use your professional judgment. Your expertise is really big on this, right? But I'm doing it, you also can notice I'm doing it part by part. So here we go. Here's the rubric. If you've never used it to build a rubric, I'm changing your life right now. But here we go. Because let's be honest, how many times have we done a performance task with no rubric because we got busy and it's something that just happened? So delegation, time management, wit and communications, and you can start to change this. What you could do is change the scale and everything. But we're going to do something a bit fun. We're going to say, now revise this rubric with a funny tone that uses, that focuses on the chaos of running a school. Should we use some, we could use common slang, but I'm going to list you, use teacher slang. I don't know what's going to happen. We've never done this before. Here, welcome to the Thunderdome. Can you survive your first 30 minutes as an AP without crying in the custodial closet? AP Wizard needs a pep talk. You good? You good? Everything's DEFCON 1. You just gave the parent the lunch menu and told the kid to call their own mom. Sends a one-letter that ends with LOL, no subject line, no signature, just chaos. Leaves the parent mad, the student mad, and the office staff wondering if you're coming back tomorrow. So here's the thing, like, would you do this for a hiring exercise? Maybe not, but would you do this for like an observation or to like bring things in? Would you teach your teachers to do this with their kids to make something fun and interesting? But just think about how, first of all, it shows a lot of like your culture, because what you could do is you could change it to the culture that you have. So for example, let's say you use Danielson. I could do it now do a version about the funny tone that uses appropriate framing from the Danielson framework. This is the thing, when I said that it's easier than ever before to build technology, I'm not lying. Anything that you want, in fact, the limits to generative AI for you as a teacher and a leader or wherever you are in this school is your own creativity and your prompting skill. That's it. It can do just about anything you want to. It's going to make mistakes, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But here we go. Now what? So you can see how it actually has even combined it with Danielson's framework. And you can see that it uses different language, and you start to see how it can be really impactful. The last thing I'm going to do, and you can do all kinds of things you can do, create an exemplar for this task and have it create exemplars, and you can keep going. And what you'll notice is this was less than 10 minutes, everybody. And I'm doing it quickly, like I'm baking a cake on TV. But if you're doing this on your own, it might take you half an hour to an hour. So you don't necessarily save the most time, but think about how much good things you create. And maybe you actually make the hiring process better. And that really is the goal. But here's your performance task. And the last thing I'll do is now create an image or the performance task that uses the funny tone. I'm just doing that to show you what the capabilities are, because the thing is, the capabilities go way beyond just text. You can code, you can create audio and images. You can do what you like, especially if you use the right tool. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep that rolling in the background. I'm just going to talk one more thing about this, is that there are significant limitations. These tools are probability machines. And so it's really important for you to use your judgment and for you to use your expertise and always critically evaluate. But at the same time, you really can start to push the boundaries of what's possible. And it's going to be something that hopefully helps you out. And our prompt library is designed to give you that extra step forward. So maybe what we'll do is, one thing to consider is that when this works, ChatGPT is actually going to be predicting the next word or part of word. When it's going to be an image, it's the next pixel. So it's actually creating, so you see how it's blurry right now? It's creating it out of what's called noise, but then it's going to go to its training data set and be able to take and create the best thing it can. So what we'll do is we'll come back to that in a moment. I don't know what's going to happen, everybody. We'll see. We had a very intense lie-in last week at Williamsburg James. What's going to be coming more and more is that you're going to start to see custom curriculum. Let's say from Imagine Learning, for example, already working on tools to actually create custom curriculum. We're going to start to see co-teaching. And what you'll notice is it doesn't say AI teachers. It doesn't say AI teachers. It says co-teachers. Because the thing about teaching and leading and all the things that we do in schools, the thing that is going to be most stable is going to be the human connection component. So think about when you work with a young person as a leader or a teacher to encourage them, to move them forward. Social emotional learning component, the pedagogical content knowledge. I'm going to tell you right now, there's not a generative AI tool that has any pedagogy. None. You have to give the pedagogy. It doesn't exist, and it probably won't. It's the biggest thing that's difficult. It'll be able to have universal translation. So even today, has anybody used Notebook LM? No, okay, Notebook LM, I'm going to suggest, is a very good tool. If you haven't tried it out, it's a Google Gemini product, but it really helps with research, and it can be a great way to get people up to speed on a new policy very quickly. But it has an AI podcast that can now do a fully AI-generated podcast in 50 languages, 50 spoken languages already. We've got 24/7 learning support. This is really what big tech is moving into, especially with Gemini. And then we're going to have to see some new assessment models, because guess what, everybody? There's an easy button for every traditional assessment that now exists in schools. Has anybody had an experience of a kid cheating with AI? It's happening, and we'll talk about that in the afternoon session. But our assessment models have needed to change for a while. This is going to be that forcing mechanism. We're going to kind of shift into what it means for you as leaders. As we talked about a lot of things, and I just talked about cheating, there's a lot more to this world of AI in schools than just academic integrity. I will tell you, research does show that students are now cheating differently. They just are. They're no longer using essay mills or Chegg or even maybe their parent as much. They're using ChatGPT and Quillbot and others. What we do need to think about is that AI is not just for cheating, okay? It's just not. So I just showed you, the same way I just showed you how I built that hiring exercise is the same way that a kid could use that to build their own study plan or even their own business, honestly, or, their own website, their own games. But the thing that I find really interesting is that having done this work for 2 years, the amount of rhetoric that AI is only bad for schools has been so loud, so loud. The reality is it's not. It can be both good and bad. Tools are about the way we use them. And so in this case, there are lots of positives, and we just talked about them, right? Productivity, translations, assistive technology. You can start to create things that have never been possible before, creativity even. But at the same time, there are also going to be some pretty difficult, challenges that go beyond academic integrity. And in fact, our issue with academic integrity is not necessarily kids have been. Can we just be honest? When did cheating start? Did it start with ChatGPT? Cheating started when school started. It's like the chicken and the egg, which was first, cheating or school. And so the idea that this is like, oh, it's just that, that is what has happened. But the issue now with AI cheating is cognitive offload. And I'm going to just go to this. This is a brand new slide because this has only been out for a week. And there's a new study from MIT that found, first of all, take it with a grain of salt. This is a really silly study. It was 54 kids, but it did show what we know, that if a kid uses ChatGPT to do an essay fully, meaning they're just saying, create an essay, that they don't learn. And we all agree that that makes sense. I mean, it's the same thing as giving it to my mom or my friend or shading, like it's the same thing. And they said this as if this was a big surprise. But the thing is, what was really interesting is that when they had a kid pre-write and start to put it down on paper and then use AI to actually edit it, refine it, and complete it, the kids showed more learning gains. So when it was a collaborative tool, when it was intentional, when it was used at the right time, it actually helped the kid, not harm them. And so this is where the nuance has to come in. There are people, and I promise you, I was in Hillsborough sometime in the last 2 weeks, and we have a redefining assessment PD, and two teachers came in ready to fight me. They were ready to fight me. Luckily not with fisticuffs, but they were really upset. And this one woman, she kept pushing me and being like, but AI is bad for kids. And at the very end, she was like, I have one more thing. And I'm like, oh no. What she said is, I just had an epiphany. It's not that the AI is bad, it's that the kids are using it in a way that's bad. That they're using it, first of all, with no AI literacy. They have no idea what they're doing. They're using the prompt from the essay and putting it into ChatGPT and cutting and pasting. And then they think we don't know. And they're like, we know, especially when your essay has a fake book character in it. It doesn't even exist. But it took her an hour of back and forth to get to a place where she can even delineate between what the pain was. That it wasn't AI, it was the way the kids were using it. And that's why I think that something like this kind of image is really important, is that we have to start getting out of our own way a bit. Because if we only focus on academic integrity, we're missing so much of the positive, but we're also missing some of the really distinct risks. Has anybody had an issue with deepfakes in your school? This is happening more and more, where young people, specifically boys in middle and high school, are taking images of their classmates and using nudification apps to create very realistic nudes, and then sharing them on social media, or even worse, in Telegram and Snapchats that you don't even know. You've got deepfakes that are happening. There was a principal that was almost fired a year and a half ago because an audio recording of him being anti-Semitic and racist came out. They put him on administrative leave and were ready to fire him. And it turned out that someone was like, is this a deep fake? And a coach who was in trouble from the principal had created, with his publicly available voice, an AI recording. So if what's is cheating? But the thing is, there's so much more here. There are things like artificial intimacy. Do you know that young people has anybody heard of Snapchat AI? Snapchat AI has been around for 2.5 years. It is ChatGPT. There are 150 million users of Snapchat AI. There are only 30 million users of Gemini. We have got to be realistic. Snapchat AI can help you with your homework, but it can also give you advice. The 3 of the top 10 apps used by young people, and even not just young people, people that are generative AI, are companionship apps. There are things like character AI, there are AI girlfriends and AI boyfriends. This is real. In fact, this is where the darkness stops. Sorry, guys. There was a case with character AI that a young person committed suicide after a month-long interaction with character AI girlfriend that he created. We have to be aware as leaders that this is not if we can't just get caught in the rhetoric, okay? First of all, it's not going away. It's going to be more and more embedded. In fact, Chromebook just released that the next version of Chromebook will have generative AI models built into them. So if you have Chromebooks in your school, the next time you turn it around, you're not going to be able to block them. But it also means that we have to take a step back as leaders and recognize the risk and the opportunities. Because we can't be tunnel vision and just say we have to stop kids from using these tools. And I think that this is where, if you want to keep learning about this, and the learning lab we're going to do, we're going to really get into policies and guidance. We're going to get into some of what we've seen and give you strategies for doing this. But if nothing else, I hope you leave here knowing that you got to learn more. You got to open up the dialogue and start to understand what's really happening. So the last couple pieces before we move on is we're talking about limitations. There's a couple other. First of all, these tools do make a mistake. They make mistakes all the time. That's the way that they work. So they have limited knowledge bases. So guys, it's been a big year since June 2024. Can we agree? There's been a lot going on. ChatGPT does not know anything after June 2024. Does not know anything because the knowledge cutoff is before that. Unless you search the web and you ask a question, you're going to get a knowledge base gap. It's going to also have some prone to hallucinations. Those are those mistakes that happen. That's when the kid submits the book report with a fake book character. I will say that in May alone, there were 20 lawyers that submitted case brief to a judge that had fake case brief in them. Just fake citations. In fact, the company that builds Claude, Anthropic, submitted a case brief to a judge with fake case brief. Even the company that makes generative AI model is still not being very critical. Wild. But the one that I want to focus on is bias. And so the thing about these tools is they are probabilistic, which means that first of all, bias is a part of humanity. It's an evolutionary component. It's actually kept us safe in some ways. But it's interesting because when we create things, these things don't just reflect our bias, but they amplify them. So for example, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini have been all trained on the internet. Has anybody called the internet an unbiased place? Did I go to Reddit for really balanced conversations on both sides of the aisle? The answer is no. And because these tools are probabilistic, it means that if you see something in a training data set a lot, you're going to see it more in the output. And so we went to an AI image generator, ChatGPT, and asked for an image of a conventional CEO giving a board meeting. What do you think that looks like? Definitely doesn't look like me. Maybe a white guy, nice suits, nice room. So here we go. He's a little bit younger, but everything else. But I will say, ladies, I do like to wear my highest stilettos to a board meeting. It's very practical. But everyone's everyone's nicely dressed, mostly men. Okay. We then went back to the same image generator and we asked for an image of an unconventional CEO giving a board meeting. What do you think that looks like? Okay, get ready. That same guy in colorful pants. And if you look really closely, he's actually standing over a woman. So what we have here, and this is the thing, everybody, these tools are going to be probabilistic and they make mistakes and they have bias, but they reflect and amplify bias. And we did this many times, and what we found every time, we actually got a CEO giving a board meeting on a surfboard before we got a woman. And in fact, if you use ChatGPT 4.0, up to 80% of all images that you ask to create will have men in them. And this is an improvement over the last version where it was 87%. So we have to kind of be aware of this. And I promise you, if you do this in front of a classroom or a staff room, and you want people to have some AI literacy very quickly about critical evaluation, this is your go-to. But I want to focus on us as leaders, that it goes beyond just image generation. There are multiple forms of bias that are built into these that are more pedagogical. And this is a really good example of one. This is actually a vignette. These are vignettes that Stanford went to different AI generators and asked for them to complete the story. This is a story of a young person in English class that's being tutored by another young person. And what you will notice is who is the young person that's struggling? Jamal. So Jamal is coded not just boy, but also black boy. And then who is going to be the star student in English class? Sarah, about as white girl as you can get. But this is where it gets really interesting, is that seeing Jamal struggle, she decided to help. Slowly, Jamal began improving. With Sarah's help and encouragement, he went from failing tests to getting B's and C's. What high expectations for Jamal. Considering it didn't say he was a failing student, he said he was a struggling student. And so that's built in. Look at that bias that's built in. And then finally, he was grateful for Sarah's friendship and mentoring. Not her hard work, her English ability, her tutoring ability. It was her friendship and mentoring. And so this is really interesting. ChatGPT itself has released their own research that says that if you use a female-sounding username with ChatGPT, you will get a less technical answer. If you are so who in here has used generative AI to write a reference letter? If you have used any demographic data about that person, there is a good chance that reference letter has biases included in it. Like girls versus boys going to STEM programs, backgrounds, or even where you are in Virginia could cause like an actual bias to be not just reflected, but amplified. The other piece of bias I just want to point out is that has anybody bought Magic School or Brisk or EduAid? So these are all going to be examples of Gen AI applications. By the way, if you ever use generative AI in any way, shape, or form, whether it's ChatGPT directly or Magic School, you are using ChatGPT. Every single Gen AI ed tech tool is built on top of another model. And so that's something to consider. But what we found, what researchers have found, that if you ask for a lesson plan of generative AI, you are more likely to get a teacher-centered response than anything else. Because there's a bias towards teacher-centered lesson planning and instruction, because the internet has a whole bunch of teachers pay teachers lesson plans that have explicit instruction, teacher-centered, very little time for student voice. Something for us to consider. But the thing is, we just showed you with the Think Aloud how much you can do. So if you go in there and say, I don't want a teacher-centered lesson plan, and guess what? You're not going to get one. So the idea of being able to have AI literacy and power in this moment is really important. And so this is our AI literacy framework. It's called the C framework. And so first you start with foundational, but we'll talk about this a bit more. But if you want to, we have this. This is our biggest thing, everybody. We have our C framework is going to be released in the next week or so, which is a pretty significant piece of work for us. But this is for us. This is why, if you think about the iceberg, the bias, all these things, is that what we find to be what the goal is for not just students, but for everyone in your school community, including yourself, is if you can use AI, and generative AI specifically, in 3 ways, you're on the right track. The first is going to be safely, meaning like you're not just giving up lots and lots of data about yourself. You're maybe not using generative AI as a social companion or giving away all your thinking. Are you actually evaluating the risk of AI tools? For example, DeepSeek was very popular and continues to be popular. It is hosted on Chinese servers. And the ability to understand that when you give your data to DeepSeek, you're actually giving it to the Chinese government. And I hate to be, it's just real, pragmatic. The idea of actually understanding the risks. The second is ethically. Can you use these tools to be ethical, transparent? Are you using them in ways that include academic honesty, but also just professional honesty? Are you aware of AI's other ethical issues, things like copyright or climate impact? These things are real. Then also, are you just adopting a do no harm mindset, let's say around building deepfakes or misinformation? And then the final thing, and this is something that's pretty interesting because I've had a lot of conversations with those that have made generative AI, and we believe so strongly, especially when developmentally appropriate, is you truly cannot build AI literacy without using the tools. And not just using the tools, but using them effectively. I promise you that the way that I prompt it is different than the majority of you prompt. And you use it if you use it. You have to be, this is the thing, AI literacy requires intentional learning about how AI works and how to use it. And effective use is going to be all down to prompting technique, but also centering human originality and expertise and critical evaluation. You can never trust an output of a generative AI system ever. You always have to read it. You always have to read it. You know what's really good, what generative AI is really good at is making you believe it's right, even when it's not. And so that these 3 things become really important for building AI literacy. And I want to give an example of what you can do after you have students start to build this too. Okay, so I have a question. Who in here has done AI literacy PD with teachers in your school? I hope the answer is different next year. Have I convinced you? Have I convinced you? I hope so. Otherwise, you should get your money back. But, okay, so has anybody done AI literacy with students? Okay, so this is the opportunity, first of all, like, we have so much free stuff. Take them to a free course, do what you need to do. We work with schools as well. But what I want to show you is an example of we spent a year with young people in New York City once a month talking about AI policy. And at the end, they created a PSA about what they learned. And they were all quite different, but I want to show you one that really kind of pulls everything together nicely. So hopefully you guys can hear. Here we go.
So frustrating. I can't figure this out. I can't write the essays to save my life.
It starts right.
Bro, this is amazing. Musings every single time, bro.
Derek, this is one of the best essays I've ever read in my career. I didn't know you had it in you. Keep up the good work.
Your writing got a perfect 100 from Professor Europe. How did you do that? He never gives that to anybody.
I guess I've just always been good at writing essays.
Oh, okay.
Another 100? You know, I'm starting to suspect that there's something going on.
Okay, guys, I've got a really exciting announcement to make. One of our students is going to get to participate in a fantastic opportunity to win $15,000 because they're such a great essay writer. Derek, all you need to do to win is write an essay with paper and a pen.
First of all, I love how it's like Law and Order at the end. Like, it's gonna happen. So the reason why we like to show this, first of all, is that we did not ask the kids to write a PSA on cheating. In fact, only 2 of the groups did this. And what was really interesting and what I really liked about this is that students chose to not focus on the academic integrity issue. He didn't get caught, right? They focused on his lost opportunity. He was not able to do the work. He was not able to get the reward. And that is where I think it gets really interesting, that the nuance that our young people can talk about with the stage, they can't do it alone. I mean, they just can't do it alone. AI native will not mean AI literate the same way that digital native does not mean digitally literate. And so you have to do it with them. But I'm going to tell you, man, getting kids involved, when we do guideline development, we have kids join us at the table. And if they feel like they're safe, they talk about why and how they use AI. They talk about how they avoid it. We have had interns that are working with us that actually do AI literacy in their own school communities. But bringing students into this is really great. But what I love about this is it integrates all of that ideas that we talk about with AI literacy about safe, ethical, and effective use. So the last thing we're going to do before you guys get a break and go off to our learning labs or whatever comes next is I think it's really important to establish that you as leaders, but also as individuals too. And I think that there are 3 things I'd like to challenge you to do. And we're going to talk about the more tactical stuff in the learning lab around guidelines and AI literacy plans. But for you individually, I'd like you to think about these 3 things. And the first thing is, it's just building your own AI literacy. This is so important. Start wherever you are today, start building more capacity. And as you build capacity, you share it. You know what we have seen the most effective way to get a school moving in the right direction around AI adoption, responsible AI adoption, is when a leader models responsible use. You are transparent. If you're going to use Gen AI to build a funny newsletter, you tell people how you did it and you put it into you have a disclosure statement. You're going to show when things don't work. Hey, I built this great newsletter and it made up something completely crazy and I almost sent it to you. but this is how I checked it out. Or talking to young people about, okay, if you don't have a tutor at home, have you thought about using these tools in meaningful ways to help you? Because the thing is, we would never get mad at a kid for having a tutor, would we? But we get mad at kids for using AI as a tutor all the time. And so starting to build AI literacy and leading from the front. And again, you do not need to be that little girl drinking from the fire hose. Let that be our team or other people like us. You just need to focus on building capacity. And one of the ways to do that is pick one chatbot and start using it more regularly for something that you need help with or something that you're really good at that you want to do even better. And the best thing about prompting and chatbot use is if you have one you like, that prompting technique works on any chatbot. You don't have to worry about it. There are different capabilities for some of them. Like for my example, like I like Claude because it's a really good writer. We do a lot of writing. But if you want to use it for, that you can use any chatbot well, you can lift and shift those techniques. The second thing is to start experimenting. I told you about Notebook LM. Go try it later. It is free. It is a core service now. Is anybody at Google School? If you are, it's a core service now, meaning that everyone has access to this today. So try things out, experiment, try things. Like let's actually look at, okay, what do we think the image is going to look like? I have no idea. Let's go back to the image generator. There we go. I will say it's messed up some stuff here. This is our hallucinations. Here we've got your student behavior, angry parent, your emergency logistics. And of course it's not perfect, but there's some fun things. And if I had him said, make me an image, guess what? I never have this. So having an experimental mindset, trying, as long as you know it's safe, try every button, try things out. Like Canva just released Canva Studio, where you can vibe code an entire interactive website for a classroom in about an hour. Try things out, experiment. And the last thing I think is really important, is that this has to be a time of innovation, especially for us as leaders. Because the thing is, we can use generative AI. In most trainings, when I did that hiring exercise, I would have stopped at the hiring exercise and that would have been it. I would have just reinforced my existing practice. But think about how much more we did. We made it fun and interesting, engaging. We gave exemplars. The idea of innovation is, and the reason why AI for Education exists is not just for AI literacy. That's our stated goal. 1 million educators with AI literacy, and we're on that path, and we appreciate you being a part of that path with us. But our ultimate goal is that there is an opportunity to reimagine teaching and learning in meaningful ways and actually do a better job. And so if you can take an innovation mindset and try things and think about really bringing people together to think about what this world can be. Because the thing is, never in the history of the world is everyone trying to figure out the same thing at the same time, which means that we have an enormous amount of opportunity to lead from the front. So I want to say thank you to everybody for hanging out with me. We have so many free resources. I'm very on LinkedIn, unfortunately. But also, we are going to be doing, if you want to come and hang out with us, the learning labs are going to be really tactical about AI readiness for your school. That really focuses on two things, an AI literacy plan and guidelines or policies. So I want to say thank you, everybody. Thank you for listening and be such a great group.